Under the shroud of night, as the world sinks into silence, only the whisper of the wind remains, telling tales long asleep beneath the sands of ancient deserts. There, every grain of sati still carries the fading footprints of caravans and merchants who once shouldered the dream of uniting East and West. They called that route the Silk Road, the first artery of human civilization, where goods, faiths, music, and knowledge flowed ceaselessly like an eternal current. Tonight, let your dreams follow that journey, from the towering walls of Chang'an to the distant shores of the Mediterranean, from the galloping hooves of Zhangqian to the echoes of Buddhist sutras reverberating through the mystical caves of Dunhuang. Each landscape, each civilization is a fragment in the grand mosaic of human longing, to transcend limits, to seek knowledge, and to weave the world together. Close your eyes and walk with me through the entire history of the Silk Road, where ancient dreams still breathe beneath the night sky. Amid the turning of empires and the winds shifting across the northern steppes, China entered a new age under Emperor Wu of Han. It was an era when the boundaries of the world were blurred. Mountains and deserts not only separated peoples, but also concealed civilizations that had never known each other's names. In the imperial capital of Chang'an, where golden dragons soared above palace roofs, the young emperor bore within his heart an ambition greater than any dynasty before him, to expand the horizon of the Middle Kingdom and reach the lands that lay beyond the edge of the sky. But before the light of ambition could spread, darkness cloaked the borders. To the north, the Xiongnu, nomadic horsemen swift as the wind, raided ceaselessly, burning villages, plundering harvests, and leaving borderlands in constant terror. To defend the heartland and repel the northern threat, Emperor Wu understood he needed a distant ally, one who could strike the enemy from behind. And in the blurred sketches of frontier maps brought by scouts, a name surfaced like a whisper of destiny. The Great Yuezhi, a people once driven westward by the Xiongnu, now dwelling beyond the far side of the Tian Shan Mountains, where the sun sets over the western plains. In 138 BCE, Zhang Qian, a young, loyal official, was chosen to bear this mission. He was neither general nor noble, but an ordinary man with an extraordinary heart, willing to face the unknown. At the farewell ceremony, as bronze drums echoed through the halls of Chang'an, few knew that his journey would open not only a political alliance, but the greatest trade route in human history, the Silk Road. He departed Chang'an with over 100 companions, crossing windswept frontiers where cold gusts lifted clouds of sand, following the faint trails of oases toward lands unmarked on any map. Yet fate tested him at the very beginning. After crossing the Yellow River, his entire expedition fell into the hands of the Xiongnu. They were captured, every one of them. A voyage of hope turned into 13 long years of captivity amid dust and desolation. But even in those years of imprisonment, Zhang Qian did not surrender to despair. He watched, listened, and learned. He observed how the Xiongnu bred horses, traded furs, forged weapons, and connected with Western tribes. He realized that beyond those endless deserts lay an entire world of exchange. Caravans trading gold for silk, jade for horses, spices for steel. Years passed, Seizing a moment of tribal unrest, Zhang Qian and a small group escaped. They crossed the perilous Pamir Mountains, traversed glaciers and snowbound valleys. Starving and thirsting, moving ever westward, toward the sun that never set. At last, they reached Bactria, a thriving land born from the mingling of Greek and Persian legacies, where cities of baked brick glowed beneath the Central Asian sun. There, Zhang Qian found not allies for war, but something greater than victory: the network of intercontinental trade. He was astonished to see Chinese silk in the hands of Bactrian merchants, those same soft fabrics once reserved only for Han empresses, now shimmering in Western bazaars, traded for gold, gems, and incense. He realized that secret trade routes had long existed, routes where goods passed through dozens of hands over thousands of miles, while their origins faded into myth. Zhang Qian understood then that the world was not divided by deserts and mountains, but bound together by footsteps, by those brave enough to walk beyond their horizons. After years of wandering, he returned to Chang'an, his body broken, but his mind carrying the map of a new world. His report to the Han court shook the empire. Rich lands to the west, city-states of Central Asia, heavenly horses that ran like the wind, and treasures unseen before. Emperor Wu, with vision beyond his age, saw what few could. This was a road not merely for conquest, but for commerce and human prosperity. Thus, the Silk Road was born. At first, only a string of relay posts and wooden border markets amid the sands, but soon it became the great artery linking Asia and Europe, where gold, silver, spices, glass, and silk mingled with languages, faiths, and human yearning. In quiet humility, Zhang Qian accomplished what no army ever could. He opened the borders of the world through knowledge and courage. Later generations would call him the man who first charted the Silk Road. But more than that, he became the symbol of humanity's eternal desire to overcome fear, seek the unknown, and connect civilizations that once seemed destined never to meet. And tonight, as the wind sweeps across the dunes of the Taklamakan, perhaps the echo of Zhang Qian's horse still lingers, reminding us that every great journey begins with a simple question: what awaits beyond the horizon? When Zhang Qian returned from those faraway lands of wind and sand, the Han court awoke as if from a long isolationist slumber. His report, filled with strange names like Bactria, Yuezhi, and Parthia, opened Emperor Wu's eyes to a new reality. Beyond the desert was not emptiness, but pathways to the world. From that moment, the idea of foreign trade first took root in Chinese statecraft, and from the hand of a visionary ruler, it would grow into a network spanning continents, uniting civilizations from the Pacific to the Mediterranean. After Zhang Qian's mission, the Han no longer looked westward with suspicion, but with the gaze of a conqueror through commerce. Emperor Wu understood. If war could expand borders, trade could make empires endure. So the court organized official trade caravans following Zhang Qian's route, crossing the Gansu corridor, skirting the northern rim of the Taklamakan Desert, journeying toward the lands where the sun set. Along their way, markets arose. Postal stations and customs were established, transforming the empty dunes into an ordered network of exchange, governed by law, protected by men. These caravans carried silk, porcelain, lacquerware, jade, tea, and bronze mirrors, the refined treasures of Chinese civilization. They traveled in processions of hundreds of camels, their bronze bells chiming softly in the night wind, like the distant hymn of a culture expanding its borders through trade, not the sword. To the west, the kingdoms of Central Asia, Fergana, Sogdiana, Parthia, became vital nodes in this growing network. Fergana, nestled in fertile valleys, was famed for its heavenly horses, creatures said to sweat blood as if blessed by the god of war himself. The Han coveted them as strategic treasures, willing to exchange gold, silk, and titles for their lineage. Thus, Fergana's horses were traded for Chinese silk, forming one of humanity's first truly international transactions. Farther west, Sogdiana, the land of shrewd and daring merchants, became the living soul of the Silk Road. The Sogdians were not merely traders, they were the architects of intercontinental logistics, linking Central Asian oases with India, Persia, and even Rome. They spoke many tongues, mastered diverse customs, and were the first to understand that trade was not merely the exchange of goods, but of civilizations. Still farther west, where the eastern light faded into the Persian dusk, the Parthian Empire rose as the bridge between the world's two ends. Controlling the strategic lands from Iran to Mesopotamia, they held in their grasp the lifeblood of commerce between China and Rome. Parthia did not produce silk, but grew rich by controlling its flow, with each spool of silk passing through their hands. Its price multiplied like alchemy, until in Rome it became a symbol of power, beauty, and divine luxury. In the capital of Rome, nobles draped themselves in silk as thin as mist, an extravagance that Pliny the Elder recorded with astonishment. The Romans spend millions in gold each year merely to purchase the transparency of cloth. To them, silk was not clothing, it was the radiance of the East, the mysterious brilliance of a world the West could scarcely comprehend. Yet for a single bolt of silk to reach the Mediterranean, it had to cross thousands of miles of burning sands, mountains of ice, and storms of dust, passing through countless hands and tongues. On that vast map, the Tarim Basin, an arid bowl ringed by the Tian Shan, became the beating heart of the route. There, the oases of Tarim, Kashgar, Khotan, Turfan rose like harbors in the desert. Under the moonlight, they gleamed like sanctuaries of the gods, where caravans rested, bartered, drew water, and prayed for safe passage. Kashgar, standing at the crossroads of all routes, became the most vibrant trade city of the ancient world. The hoofbeats of Chinese horses mingled with the chime of Persian bells and the chants of Indian monks. Khotan was renowned for its white jade, milk-like and pure, the stone that Chinese emperors revered as the emblem of virtue and authority. Turfan, lying below sea level, was nourished by underground Kharez canals, channeling water from mountain snows, turning the dead earth into a paradise of barley and raisins, sustaining caravans before they braved the Taklamakan's burning sea. Each oasis was a microcosm, a world where languages, faiths, and music intertwined. Indians taught Sogdians the Dharma of the Buddha. Persians shared the art of metal engraving, and the Han traded silk reeling and bronze forging techniques. This road carried not only goods, but knowledge, belief, and dreams. When night fell over the desert, the torches of the caravans cast faint light upon the wind-carved walls. The low groans of camels and the clinking of bells drifted through the air like whispers of time. Here, in the void, humankind had spun the first thread that bound the ends of the world. From then on, the Han Empire was no longer merely a realm of land and power. It became an empire of exchange, whose strength flowed not from armies, but from the invisible current of trade. And upon each shimmering strand of silk, history began to write the first chapter of ancient globalization, where East and West, for the first time, beheld one another through the radiant light of silk. That night, the Silk Road was truly born, not from conquest, but from humanity's yearning to reach across the unseen borders of the world. When the Han caravans had turned deserts into arteries of trade, when silk, jade, and incense had journeyed beyond all political frontiers, the Silk Road took on a deeper, subtler mission, one not of commerce, but of spirit. Amid the jingling of camel bells and the signing of silver contracts, another current began to flow, one of faith, thought, and the timeless question of what it means to be human. It was within this vast exchange that Buddhism, the torch of compassion and philosophy from ancient India, began its journey across deserts and mountains of snow, spreading its light throughout the vast expanse of Eurasia. In the first centuries of the Common Era, as thousands of merchants linked India with China, Buddhism journeyed with them, not by the sword, but through scripture, compassion, and the hearts of travelers seeking truth. From the verdant valleys of the Indus River, across Afghanistan, and the snowbound passes of the Pamars, into the arid plains of the Tarim Basin, that faith transformed with every land it touched. Like a seed taking root in many cultures, each sprouting a different form, yet sharing the same source. Gandhara, the realm between ancient India and Persia, was where that seed first blossomed. Beneath the shadow of the Swat Mountains, the art of Gandhara emerged, a miraculous fusion of East and West. There, Greek artisans, remnants of Alexander the Great's legacy, met Indian monks. From their hands, the Buddha was, for the first time, sculpted in human form, a serene face, a dignified, meditative posture, curls of Greek hair, and robes draped in Roman style. In that sculpture, Buddhist philosophy and Hellenistic aesthetics became one, creating an art that transcended religion and became the universal language of enlightenment. From Gandhara, monks carried the Dharma across Central Asia. In Bamiyan, where today only two vast hollows remain carved into the cliffs, once stood two monumental Buddhas, over 50 meters tall, symbols of Central Asia's golden age of Buddhism. At dusk, their shadows stretched across the Bamiyan Valley, falling upon weary caravans, reminding travelers that amid their worldly journeys lay another path, the inward pilgrimage, the search for stillness within the storm of life. Merchants, once driven solely by profit, gradually became patrons of faith. They built monasteries and stupas, provided food and funds for the Sangha, for in the impermanence of the desert, only belief endured. Through them, great Buddhist centers like Khotan and Turfan flourished, places of trade, study, and cultural exchange. In Khotan, artisans merged Han silk weaving with Indian symbols of Praji and the lotus, creating fabrics that were both commodities and sacred relics. In Turfan, ancient manuscripts have been found written in hybrid tongues, Sanskrit, Sogdian, and Chinese, testament to the fusion of faith, language, and intellect. And then the road led to Dunhuang, the luminous pearl at the edge of the Gobi Desert, where the material and spiritual worlds converged. From the 4th century onward, monks, merchants, and artists carved into stone, painted on walls, and copied scriptures onto scrolls, creating one of humanity's greatest wonders, the Mogao Caves. Nearly 500 grottos were hewn into the cliffside, their walls adorned with tens of thousands of murals and filled with sacred texts, preserving over a millennium of cultural fusion along the Silk Road. In the flicker of oil lamps, the scribes bent over their scrolls, aware that they were safeguarding not merely religion, but the memory of humankind. The murals of the Mogao Caves are a spiritual map of the ancient world, the Buddha seated in the heavens of India. Beside him, Persian angels, Sogdian musicians, and in the distance, Chinese merchants clad in Han robes, all gathered in one sacred space, as if the vast universe itself were but a single temple of wisdom and compassion. From Dunhuang, Buddhism entered China, not as a foreign creed, but as a new cultural current, blending with Taoism and Confucianism to become the spiritual foundation for millions. That transformation owed itself to the great monks and translators, those who devoted their lives to carrying wisdom from the western regions to the east. Among them, Kumara Jiva, the son of an Indian father and a Kuchayan princess, stood as one of history's greatest translators. He translated not merely words, but spirit. His renditions of the Lotus Sutra and the Heart Sutra were both precise and poetic, allowing Buddhist thought to bloom within the Chinese tongue. After him came Faxian, the elder monk who crossed over 30 kingdoms in his quest for the sacred texts. His decade-long pilgrimage became the embodiment of unwavering devotion, a journey through storms and frontiers to bring home scriptures that had never before reached China. 2 centuries later, Xuanzang, the legendary monk of the Tang dynasty, known to the West as Xuanzang, the pilgrim monk, set forth. For 17 years, he crossed deserts, traversed 128 kingdoms, studied at Nalanda, the ancient university of India, and returned with 657 volumes of scripture, ushering in the zenith of Chinese Buddhism. These pilgrimages were not acts of mere faith. They were voyages of knowledge, where religion became the bridge of civilization. Through their footsteps, Indian philosophy mingled with Greek artistry, Sogdian language, and Chinese thought, creating a singular cultural universe known as the Silk Road. When night descends upon Dunhuang, and the desert wind whispers through the ancient caves, one can almost hear the echo of the Lotus Sutra reverberating against the time-worn walls. It is a reminder that the Silk Road did not merely unite empires, it united the human soul. From the dust and silence, faith, art, and knowledge together illuminated the long night of human history. As the final chime of sutra bells faded through Dunhuang's caves, the world beyond had already begun to change. The desert still breathed, but the caravans grew larger, richer, and carried not only goods and scriptures, but the vitality of a new era. The winds of knowledge from India, Persia, and Rome had merged with the breath of China, preparing for one of the most radiant epochs in human history. And when the dawn of the 7th century cast its light upon the walls of Chang'an, the Silk Road entered its golden age, the age of the Tang Dynasty. It was an era when China was not merely an empire, but the center of the world. After the chaos of the Sui, Emperor Taizong of Tang, Li Shimin, looked westward to the oases of the Tarim Basin, once divided by war, and resolved to unite them under the golden dragon of the Tang. With vision and military might, the empire established the Angxi Protectorate, bringing cities like Khotan, Kashgar, Turfan, and Samarkand under its protection. The Trans-Asian route was no longer a perilous journey, but a lifeline, secured by law, soldiers, and the authority of the throne. Under Tang governance, even the desert winds seemed to soften. Caravans from Persia, Arabia, Sogdia, India, and Byzantium streamed toward Chang'an, the Tang capital, the largest and most cosmopolitan city on earth. By night, Chang'an blazed with oil lamps, incense mingled with the scent of spice, and voices of 100 peoples filled the streets. In the western and eastern markets, Persian merchants bargained beside Arabs. Sogdian chatter intertwined with Chinese. Music from Samarkand flowed from pipa lutes, while Persian dancers turned gracefully beneath the moon. Chang'an had become the meeting place of East and West, a miniature world of humanity. Stone-paved streets led to international hostels where merchants stayed, where poetry, philosophy, and art were traded like invisible treasures. The Sogdians mediated commerce. Arabs brought spices, pearls, and glass. Persians introduced metalwork and jewelry making, while the Chinese offered silk, tea, porcelain, paper, and ink, gifts that would reshape the world's civilization. Across the continent, silk remained the emblem of the road, yet it was no longer alone. Caravans now carried smooth white porcelain from Suzhou, paper from Luoyang, tea from Sichuan, and fragrant resins from the south. In return, they brought back Fergana's celestial horses, Yitid from Khotan, amber from the Baltic, frankincense from Arabia, and colored glass from Syria. Each item passed through countless hands over thousands of miles, gathering new stories of faith, of people, of civilization. But the true wonder of the Tang lay not in material wealth, but in the openness of the spirit. The Tang dynasty was one of the rare ages in Chinese history that embraced all faiths, all philosophies, and all the world's voices. In Chang'an, Buddhism, Taoism, Zoroastrianism, Islam, and Nestorian Christianity coexisted in harmony. Buddhist temples rose beside Persian fire altars. Nestorian monasteries bore inscriptions in both Syriac and Chinese, proclaiming, "The light from the west has shone upon the east." Monks from Nalanda, imams from Damascus, and priests from Byzantium all gathered in Chang'an. They met in tea houses and libraries filled with scrolls, exchanging not only doctrines of faith, but knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. Chang'an became a global center of learning, where ideas flowed as freely as trade, and belief was exchanged like precious jade. From this vibrant heart, Tang art and poetry reached their zenith. Poets like Li Bai and Du Fu, breathing the air of Western merchants and Persian melodies, crafted verses imbued with the soul of desert winds and moonlit frontiers. The moon shines over the vast desert. The traveler gazes toward Chang'an. Even Tang music transcended China's borders. The Daming Palace echoed nightly with Persian drums, kucha lutes, and Central Asian dances. In that rhythm, the ancient world became a symphony, where no boundaries remained between nations or creeds, only humanity and its yearning for beauty. From this center of power, technologies and ideas flowed outward once more. Papermaking and woodblock printing, born in Tang, China, crossed the Tianshan Mountains via Sogdian merchants and Muslim scholars to Samarkand, then westward to Baghdad and Damascus, igniting the Islamic Golden Age. No one could have foreseen that those delicate sheets of Tang paper would one day become the seeds of Europe's Renaissance. Under the Tang, the Silk Road reached its perfect form, a transcontinental network of trade, faith, and culture. The roads from India, Central Asia, Persia, Arabia, Byzantium, and beyond all converged upon Chang'an, then branched outward again like veins nourishing the ancient world. It was not merely a route of commerce, but a symbol of unity between matter and spirit, knowledge and belief, humanity and history. And as night descended upon Chang'an, beneath 10,000 flickering lamps, the desert wind still whispered through its stone streets. In that wind lingered the scent of Arabian myrrh, the distant ring of camel bells from the Taklamakan, and the breath of civilizations meeting in one radiant city. The Tang era, the pinnacle of the Silk Road, was not merely a time of prosperity. It was a rare moment when all humanity spoke one shared language, the language of openness, knowledge, and beauty. And beneath the moonlight shimmering upon Chang'an's walls, the road that bound the world together still glowed, like a strand of silk stretched across the night of humankind. Yet even as Chang'an's lights still blazed, and Persian songs mingled with camel bells, new winds began to rise in the far west. The desert shifted, carrying with it new currents of faith, power, and knowledge. The world was entering a new epoch, where swords, creeds, and trade intertwined, where ancient empires crumbled, giving birth to rising Islamic and nomadic civilizations. From the ashes of the Tang, the Silk Road once again transformed, reborn in the flames of a new age. In the mid-8th century, the skies of Central Asia blazed with the Battle of Talas, 751 CE, a fateful clash between the Tang Empire of the east and the Abbasid Caliphate of the west. Under the Central Asian sun, two of the world's greatest civilizations met upon the banks of the Talas River. War drums thundered across the steppes, and blades flashed like meteors falling to earth. That battle did not merely decide borders, it determined the path of human knowledge itself. The Tang forces were defeated, and with the Arab victory, the secret of paper-making, long guarded by China, fell into foreign hands. Chinese craftsmen, captured as prisoners of war, carried their knowledge to Samarkand, from where it spread to Baghdad, Damascus, Cairo, and eventually to Europe. A single sheet of paper, passing through the hands of Quran scribes, changed the course of history. It ignited the Islamic golden age of learning. From Samarkand to Bukhara, the cities of Central Asia were no longer mere caravan stops. They became capitals of knowledge. Under the Samanid, Ghaznavid, and later the Seljuk dynasties, Islam took deep root in lands once shaped by Buddhism and ancient Persia. Brick mosques rose beside abandoned monasteries. In the golden light of the desert, the recitation of the Quran mingled with the fading tones of the old Sogdian tongue, as if civilizations themselves were conversing upon the wind. Commerce was now elevated into an art of faith. Muslim merchants devised the hawala, a credit system centuries ahead of Europe. A trader could deposit wealth in Baghdad and withdraw it in Bukhara, carrying no coin, relying solely on trust. Thus was born the first international banking network in history, transforming the Silk Road into humanity's earliest global financial system. In the desert night, the caravans still moved, but now they carried more than goods. They bore the light of science, astronomy, and philosophy. Arab scholars translated Aristotle, Ptolemy, and Euclid into Arabic, reviving Greek thought and sending it westward once more. Central Asia became the bridge between ancient Athens and medieval Europe. Yet time never stands still. The world turned, and from the far northern steppes, a storm began to rise. As Islamic empires fractured under ambition and civil strife, a new people emerged, the horsemen of the Mongolian plains, led by Genghis Khan, the warriors of the sky. In the 13th century, the Mongol Empire swept across Eurasia like a tempest of sand. From the Orkhon grasslands, they conquered China, Persia, Russia, and advanced to the edges of Europe. But what made Genghis Khan truly great was not only conquest, it was his vision of a unified world. After years of warfare, he established the Yasa, a code of laws that protected merchants, ensured freedom of religion, and guaranteed safe passage for all who traded within the largest empire the earth had ever known. He built the Yam system, relay stations stretching thousands of miles, where messengers could change horses, rest, and deliver news across continents within days. Through it, all of Eurasia, from the palaces of Beijing to the shores of the Black Sea, was bound together in a single network. Historians would call it Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace. Under the Silver Wolf banner, the ancient roads were reborn. Caravans from Venice, Genoa, and Damascus once again set forth, bearing goods, envoys, and wisdom across the continents. The Silk Road reached its ultimate zenith. Never before had humanity been so closely connected. At the heart of this empire, cities such as Samarkand, Karakorum, and Khwarezm shone like constellations. Persian merchants, Chinese engineers, Arab mathematicians, and Christian missionaries coexisted in a borderless world. Printing, gunpowder, the compass, and paper journeyed westward. Mathematics, medicine, and astronomy flowed east. It was an age of grand exchange, when every road was open and every mind hungered for knowledge. Amid that ceaseless flow rode Marco Polo, the Venetian merchant who crossed deserts and the Pamir Mountains to reach Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan and founder of China's Yuan dynasty. Marco Polo stayed nearly 20 years, witnessing the wealth, sophistication, and order of the East, then returned to Europe to tell of it. His Il Milione, the travels of Marco Polo, became a doorway into the imagination of the West, awakening Europe's thirst for exploration and discovery. But after glory, silence returned. As the Mongol Empire dissolved, The once open roads of Pax Mongolica slowly closed. Plague, war, and the rise of Europe's maritime powers dimmed the legendary route. Yet what the Silk Road had given the world could never be lost. It had taught humanity how to listen, exchange, and build civilization together. And even today, when night falls upon the steppe and cold winds sweep through the ruins of Samarkand, one might still hear the faint echo of Mongol hooves and the whisper of the desert, a reminder. Empires may fade, but the road of knowledge and human connection never dies. When the Mongol hoofbeats faded into golden sand, and the flame of Pax Mongolica dwindled to a glimmer on history's horizon, the Silk Road, the ancient artery of the world, began to fall silent. The once bustling trade routes echoed now only with the wind sighing through the ruins of weary oases. The world was changing. The empires once united under a single banner had splintered into fragments. And after centuries of traversing deserts and mountains, humankind began to seek new routes to reach one another. The 14th century dawned, bearing with it the shadows of plague, woe, and despair. In all of human history, few forces would devastate civilization as deeply as the Black Death. By the mid-1300s, from merchant ships sailing the Black Sea, the plague spread into Central Asia, then westward along the Silk Road. Cities once radiant with light and song, Bukhara, Samarkand, Merv, Balkh, the beating hearts of trade and learning, became vast cemeteries. They say the wind that passed through their crumbling walls sounded like the sighs of merchants buried beneath the sands. No more camel bells, no more the hurried voices of caravans crossing the Taklamakan. The roads that once bound empires were now shrouded in the darkness of fear. The Black Death killed not only bodies, it killed faith. Trade routes were severed, oases stood empty, and the once wealthy empires of commerce slipped into decline. Samarkand, the jewel of Central Asia, fell to ruin. Its markets of gold and silver turned to dust and ash. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. The desert reclaimed its silence once more, swallowing the dream that had once bound east and west. After those long centuries, Central Asia was no longer the crossroads of civilizations. Small Islamic khanates arose, yet none strong enough to preserve the order once held under the Tang or the Mongols. Across the boundless desert, Turkic and Timurid warlords vied for power. Caravans no longer carried silk and jade, but weapons, slaves, and creeds. Trade and war became one and the same. From the west, the Ottoman Empire rose, seizing Anatolia, then marching upon Constantinople. With their victory in 1453, they ended the Byzantine Empire and became the new gatekeepers of Asia. Every route from Europe to the east now passed through Ottoman hands. The world was divided once more. Borders replaced freedom, and tax replaced exchange. Meanwhile, in the east, the Ming dynasty emerged after sweeping away the remnants of Mongol rule. They restored order, rebuilt capitals at Nanjing and Beijing, and revived domestic roads. But unlike the dynasties before them, the Ming viewed the world with suspicion. To them, what came from beyond the frontier was chaos, danger, a threat to the Celestial Empire. Policies of isolation slowly took shape. Foreign merchants were restricted. International trade narrowed. A bureaucracy of officials tightly controlled every transaction beyond the borders. There was tribute, but no free commerce. The roads that had once carried silk and knowledge now lay still beneath the sands. Meanwhile, the Tarim Basin and Central Asia fell under local Islamic powers. Ancient cities such as Khotin, Turfan, and Kashgar became colonies of regional khanates. Instead of crossroads, they turned into fortresses of faith closed to difference. The open spirit of the Silk Road, where all religions had once coexisted, gave way to division. Along the Gansu corridor, once glorious cities like Dunhuang sank into oblivion. The Mogao caves, once alive with oil lamps and Buddhist chants, now echoed only with the wind howling through stone gates. Sand covered the murals, burying centuries of wisdom, leaving in the darkness the memory of a golden age. The world, once wide and interwoven like a vast silk tapestry, was now torn into fragments. The legendary routes, from Chang'an to Antioch, from Kashgar to Damascus, faded from the living map of humankind. All that remained was the memory of a time when people believed that to cross a desert was to meet the world. And yet, amid that long night, a faint light endured. It did not shine upon the land, but far beyond, upon the sea. In the harbors of Portugal, Spain, and Venice, sailors looked eastward. They no longer saw deserts, but sails, no longer thought of camels, but of wind compasses and stars. History was about to turn once more. The silk roads of sand were soon to be replaced by silk roads of waves, and in the mist of a new dawn, Europe set sail. When the first Portuguese sails crossed the Atlantic horizon, humankind entered a new age. On the world map, monsoon routes replaced desert trails. For the first time in history, the world was no longer split between East and West. It was being reconnected, but this time upon the oceans. In the West, Europe, newly awakened from the Middle Ages, hungered to explore, to touch the East, the fabled land of silk, spice, and gold. But the old overland routes were closed by the Ottomans. Thus, seafaring nations, Portugal and Spain, chose another path, the path of wind and water. In 1498, Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope and landed in India, opening the maritime route to the east. Soon after, Spain sent Columbus westward, seeking Asia across the ocean, only to stumble upon the Americas. The world unfolded anew, not through sand and caravans, but through waves and trade winds. Across the oceans, ships bearing the cross linked the continents. Spices from Java, pepper from Malabar, silk from Guangzhou, and gold from Africa all flowed within a new network, the Maritime Silk Road. Ports like Malacca, Calicut, Goa, Hormuz, and Aden became the seaports of Dunhuang, where civilizations met amid the roar of waves and the scent of incense. Meanwhile, in the east, China under the Ming also had its moment of maritime splendor. In the early 15th century, Emperor Yongzhou dispatched the Admiral Zheng He, a Muslim eunuch, to command the largest fleet in ancient history. Over 300 ships, with treasure vessels nearly 120 meters long, dwarfing European ships of the time, sailed with tens of thousands of sailors, envoys, and gifts. Zheng He did not sail to conquer. but to exchange, to connect, and to proclaim China's friendship to the world. From Southeast Asia to the Indian Ocean, from Sri Lanka to Arabia, from Malacca to the coast of East Africa, he carried silk, porcelain, tea, and a message of peace. Wherever he arrived, people told of the colossal ships of the East and of the admiral who brought gifts, not swords. But after his death, the Ming dream of the sea ended. Fearing the world's upheaval, the empire ordered its ships burned, its maps destroyed, and its ports sealed. China closed itself just as the West was opening. European fleets, Portuguese, Spanish, then Dutch and English, soon filled the Indian Ocean, seizing its harbors and heralding the age of global maritime empires. From that moment, the world's center of power shifted. It no longer lay upon the desert, but upon the sea, no longer in caravans, but in fleets, no longer in the hands of Asian merchants, but in those of Western empires. Yet even in decline, the Silk Road did not die. It lived on, not in maps, but in the memory and spiritual legacy of humankind. It was the first seed of globalization, when humanity discovered that no civilization could exist alone. From Chinese silk, Indian philosophy, Islamic science, Greek thought, to European craft, all had merged within the flow of the Silk Road. And today, when we gaze upon satellites stitching the sky, or fiber optic cables threading the ocean floor, we realize the world has never stopped weaving itself together. Only the tools have changed, from camels and sails to light and data, but the longing remains the same, the eternal longing to connect, exchange, and understand, the immortal yearning of the Silk Road. For humanity, by its very nature, forever seeks to touch one another. And every road, whether through sand or sea, in the end, leads to the light of knowledge. From a lone envoy named Zhang Xian, setting forth through the sands of the 2nd century BCE, the Silk Road began to breathe, like the first artery linking the distant lands of humankind. In his footsteps, Han caravans transformed perilous wilderness into bridges of hope, where every bolt of silk and every gem exchanged carried the greeting of one civilization to another. With the merchants came Buddhism, traveling not by sword, but by compassion. From Gandhara to Bamiyan, across Khotan and Dunhuang, the lamps of meditation glowed within caves, and temple bells softened the desert winds, comforting the souls of travelers searching for meaning. When the Tang dynasty arose, the Silk Road bloomed like a lotus in the desert wind. Chang'an became the beating heart of all humankind, where Persian incense mingled with Sichuan tea, where Arabic melodies blended with Tang poetry beneath moonlit wall. There, East and West no longer stood apart, only people, united by beauty, virtue, and wisdom. Then the wheel of time turned once more into the Islamic age of Central Asia, where the light of knowledge flared between Samarkand and Bukhara, cities of learning, astronomy, and language. Upon that foundation, Mongol hooves thundered again, and in Genghis Khan's hands, Eurasia was woven into a single cloth, the Pax Mongolica, where merchants and scholars could journey from Venice to Beijing under the silver seal of the wolf. But every light must fade. The Black Death swept through like a night wind, extinguishing the lamps of the desert, draping the routes of the world in mourning. Beneath that sand, the civilizations that had once touched hands now slept, silent in their own memories. And then, from the far side of the world, in the dark of the medieval night, Europe's first sails caught the wind. No longer caravans crossing the desert, but silver ships braving the storm, carrying humanity's eternal dream of finding the East once more. And as the rudder turned, the world turned with it. From camels to fleets, from sand to sea, from desert to ocean. Though empires may crumble and roads be swallowed by dust, the Silk Road lives on, in humanity's yearning for connection, in our instinct to reach across all distance. It was never merely trade. It was the voice of mankind, of curiosity, empathy, and faith that beyond the horizon we may always find ourselves again.